powerlifting or Olympic lifting?
Olympic weightlifting. You need an explanation for that. Yeah. Dissecting what demands are placed on the body, and then how can you feel strong and prepped with the muscles that produce those movements. I couldn't snatch above 60, and that should be something that I can just do on the daily. Yeah. I couldn't get past it. And then I would be like, hey, I see it. I got it. The mental part of it is really hard to deal with. It's a big part of identity. There's no real separation between that outside of life stressors and your competition or your sport stressors. Mm-hmm. When we speak about it, can interpret it as me saying it's in your head. Yeah. But it's actually like stress in your body. There are hormonal manifestations of those other stressors that mimic physical injury. Letting the injury dictate what you can't do instead of listening to the body to see what we still can do. And let me break those expectations. Yeah. Let's try some things. Yeah. Our bodies are so much more capable than we give them credit for. You can get a long, long ways with a good plan.
Wellness Ninjas, welcome back to another episode of the Wellness Dojo Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Craig, and I'm very excited to have today's guest in studio. I've been on this tear of virtual podcast episodes, and so I'm really excited to have you in studio. Physiotherapist here in Calgary with Dynamic YYC. Welcome to the show, Terrace Boath.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to have you. You've been helping me with my shoulder injury and helping me kind of recover with that. Can you tell us just a little bit about what exactly you do with Dynamic?
Good question. Yeah, so I'm a physiotherapist and I'm the clinic director at our Seton location. Dynamic is kind of we have a different way of treating. You've experienced it. And we like to think of ourselves as a little different than the rest of the industry. But we like to work with an active population. And our goal is always to have people stay in or return to and thrive in their activities that they enjoy. So really, my job is to facilitate that. Some of that is with hands-on treatment. A lot of it was with exercise and modifying activities for people, and I like helping people.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about, right? It's like, how do I help people better? How do I help people more effectively? Yeah. And you're right. Like, you guys do have just such a cool vibe, even just walking in there. Mm-hmm. It's something we talked about. I think the first time I ever saw you, I was like, just love the feel. Like, there's this openness and. You were even mentioning you guys as massage therapists, even a little bit different there, where it's not your classic type of massage where you're getting under the linens and very private stuff like that. It's no, it's just all about making the body move in ways that you can move better.
Yeah, totally. We pride ourselves on the fact that if you walked into the clinic, you wouldn't be able to tell who's physio, who's chiro, and who's massage, because we utilize the same skills across the board. And like you said, with massage, it's over clothes or sports bra or whatever, but same concepts of trying to change how you feel using soft tissue work and massage and exercise and loading people on the table so that we can see how we can modify people's pain, and then we transition that straight into their exercises to make all of those concepts match as closely as possible, and be as specific as possible to the things that they need to do. That's really what we try to do and be the best at in Dynamic.
Yeah, I love it. And it's a really cool concept too that you actually don't see that in a lot of places, or it's something that I try and do with my team as well, is we're all on an even playing field in a sense. It doesn't matter necessarily what your education is or what your experience is. We're a team, and so how can we help each other? So that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we spend a lot of time working with new clinicians, or as people come on board with Dynamic, with kind of the education and teaching how we want to treat. And so it does look very similar across the board, and we are using all the same skills. And we don't put people in boxes, but we give certain tools to use, the things that we feel are the most useful and the most effective, and we get really good at those things. Yeah.
So cool. Okay, I kind of wanted to get you warmed up because this is your first podcast, right?
First podcast ever.
All right. So I wanted to get you warmed up with a little game. Is that cool?
Yeah,
okay,
sounds
so
great.
Just a way we can get to know each other a little bit, and also the audience can get to know you. We're going to play this or that. So you just got to choose one or the other. Okay? You can give explanations, but you don't have to. If it's just like, no, this is my answer, then that's fine too. Okay? So you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, just a couple quick ones. So pizza or ice cream?
That is like two of my favorites, just right against each other.
Just like ice cream on pizza, please?
No, ruins both. I think probably because of the weather, I'm going to say ice cream.
Oh, yeah, it is. It's warm here right now. Okay, ice cream, cool. I'll play two, and I'm going to go, I'll go with the opposite. I'll say pizza, because you can have it anytime.
True.
I mean, ice cream you can too, so that's not really fair.
I would probably eat pizza for breakfast before ice cream for breakfast.
Exactly. And I have, okay, cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Yes. I kind of figured. I'm also team dogs.
Yes.
My daughter will be upset to hear that. She loves cats, but I'm team dogs as well. Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Yes. See, I don't know. I'm torn on that one. I think mountains for me. Yeah. I like to be in the mountains. Okay, this is getting a little bit trickier now.
Okay.
Massage or acupuncture?
Massage.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it depends on what I'm feeling. I have had acupuncture and used it and like it for certain things, but I think at this point, massage.
Massage?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. I'm the same. Mm-hmm. I respect acupuncture. I utilize acupuncture as well, but there's something about that, like, just that really hands-on feeling. Yeah. Okay, last one. Powerlifting or Olympic lifting?
Olympic weightlifting.
Okay.
You need an explanation for that.
Yeah, I think we need an explanation for that one, especially for where this conversation is going today.
I was waiting for this. Yeah, as an Olympic weightlifter, people mix these two up a lot. Yeah. And I think, like, I have nothing against powerlifting, and I have a great group of powerlifters that I communicate with and treat and hang out with, and they're great athletes.
You're being very careful with this right now.
Yes, but as Olympic weightlifters, if you ask me how much I bench, I'm going to get so mad at you. I'm going to roll my eyes and probably just stop the conversation. But Olympic weightlifting is an Olympic sport. And it is made of two movements, snatch and clean and jerk, whereas powerlifting is bench, squat, deadlift. And although they both, require a lot of strength and power, Olympic weightlifters pride ourselves on being very technical athletes. And that, I think, there's different demands for mobility and technique in Olympic weightlifting than there is in powerlifting.
Yeah.
And that's why if someone says, oh, what do you bench? Then I'm like, it's not the same.
Like, what do you snatch?
Yeah, exactly.
They are like as similar as they are, they're very, very different, right? Like the way that I kind of picture it is like powerlifting is more, I would say, like the foundational movements, whereas like Olympic lifting, like you said, it actually does get to be a lot more technical even in like risk for powerlifting versus Olympic lifting. Like when you're like pulling that bar, like snatching it up, and like there's I think a lot more risk in that too, right? It's more explosive almost.
Yep. Totally. I think there's so much skill acquisition that goes into Olympic weightlifting, whereas with powerlifting, it's a lot of, I don't want to make it sound simple or easy, because it's not, but it is push and pull. And so I think you have to be a grinder to be a good powerlifter, because there's a certain point where to get better at it, you're just getting stronger. And I would say, as an Olympic weightlifter, I've been doing it for almost a decade, not consistently, but like started learning probably about 10 years ago,
okay.
10 years ago. And I'm still learning technique.
Yeah.
And I'm learning it over and over and over and over and over. And I think that I haven't hit the ceiling of how much, how far technique gains can get me before it's just getting stronger at the movements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating sport. Like, it actually, the way you describe that is like, I just think back like to my martial arts as well. It's the same thing. It's like I never have, and I probably never will hit that ceiling of like, I feel like I've mastered this technique or anything like that. Whereas like, but there are movements, there's foundational movements within that sport where I'm like, okay, like I've got this movement down now, but it's like to take it to that next level and to like add that, it's a really cool thing. And like, it's also really fascinating because I follow you on social media and stuff, and like, you're just like a savage when you look at it. You're just like these like massive quads, they're just like powering through. Right?
Pride myself on that. Thank you.
I had to get that in there for you.
Yeah, I think like in the past year, starting to work with a lot more powerlifters in clinic, I'm learning more about the programming on their end, and that part of it is so different too, because they manipulate things a lot with volume and tempo. And with Olympic weightlifting, there are so many small changes in how we do the movements that emphasize different parts of the technique, that it may look like we're kind of doing the same thing every day, but we change from doing like hang snatch, power snatch from the pocket position, so you're just pulling from your hips, landing above 90 degrees, below 90 degrees, and then all of the accessory work on top of that to keep our shoulders and our hips and our knees feeling good, and then the strength acquisition is on top of the technique work. So there are little things and variables that are broken down in our programming very differently than the goal of getting stronger at one movement with just tempo and volume. With
Olympic lifting, I'm curious your thoughts on like, where does it fall into like functional training?
Yeah, like, are you referring to CrossFit or just
no,
like
just like how it actually, like how getting stronger at those movements actually impacts like your daily life?
Yeah, we have a saying with dynamic, where I think I've just kept it in my head. Something one of my coworkers has said to me is that we kind of need to train to treat and treat to train. Our job is fairly demanding. The way that we treat is really physically demanding. And I can feel that if I am treating more than I'm training, or training more than I'm treating, or being treated, something kind of falls off the rails. And not everyone has the same job that I do, but I think that concept goes. So if your work is the hardest thing you're doing in the day, your work's going to feel hard all the time.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so I don't know that there are many other movements that necessarily match the movement of snatch and clean and jerk. But as someone who uses those movements, I feel very strong in an overhead position. So things like lifting off the floor to an overhead, or, just things like if you're picking up your kids, you feel strong doing that. And I think those are the things that matter the most, meaningful movements to you. So
absolutely. And it's like, that's exactly what I thought of when you were talking about those movements. Like, I'm like, just wait till you have kids. Like, you're throwing those kids up in the air and stuff like that. You're going to be so glad you had all those movements mastered. Right? So, really good. How did you actually, like, what got you into weightlifting?
I think it was a little bit of I never really got into CrossFit, but my brother-in-law and sister own a gym that does the functional classes, like that style of classes, and so my brother-in-law started teaching me the technique, and I did do CrossFit kind of on and off with them, just to be in their gym, in their space. And then in university there was people who were doing it in just the university gym, and then there's a club on campus. And so after like humming about it for a while. I joined the club my 4th year university, and I think what really drew me into it though is like the nerdy technical aspect, but also it's a space where every body can do it and be good at it. I love sports where everyone has a space, and coming from someone who lives in a female body, it is a weight class sport, yes, but there is like place and respect for all weight classes. None is better than the other. It's just how good can you be in that class. And yeah, sports like that really draw me in. I think in the more male dominated arenas, I am a big spectator fan of football for similar reasons. You got big guys on the line that have to be good at their job. You've got wily little guys on the outside, or you know, maybe taller guys on the outside, but you can see just a wild array of bodies playing those sports and all having space there and just having to be good at their jobs when they play. I agree. I think that's such a cool thing to see, right? And it's funny because like you mentioned, like even in school and stuff like that, like you kind of attract certain crowds as well when you're you know, you're learning about the body, and like imagine when you're in school, you're surrounded by other people who are also passionate about sports and fitness and stuff, and it's just like it helps, right? Surrounding yourself with those people. I find I think something that really kind of gave me the push to get into a new sport competitively in the middle of my 20s was having athletic and a family that really emphasizes activity. And my oldest sister was competing in cross-country running and skiing, and this is something she also kind of picked up more seriously as an adult. And she took her time going through school because she wanted to compete as long as she could in that realm, and seeing her dive into it as an adult learner was just like wildly encouraging to me to do the same. And so at 24 I competed for the first time in Olympic weightlifting, and I think it's very cool to learn something as an adult.
I went and did some jiu-jitsu classes a couple of years ago. It was like before my injury and stuff, and the same thing. It was like for the first time, and I can't even remember how long, I was a student again, and like going in as like a white belt with like all these like advanced people who were just like really kicking my ass like every single class. It was like so humbling, but it was so nice to like, I was just like soaking up the information. And it's such a cool thing. I think it's such an important thing, as well as nice as it is to kind of be the master and the leader in different areas of life. I think it's just so important to also just like find areas where you can be the student too, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think if anything else, it keeps you humble.
Right. Totally.
And I find that like, I don't know, nothing else challenges you that way. And it makes you feel like you're living for something sometimes.
Yeah. Absolutely. I imagine, like, was it intimidating when you first started? Because like, again, going back to like people who maybe will go and check out your Instagram after this, they're gonna be like, man, she's a beast, like I could never do that, right? It's like, even though there's people of like all body types and this type of thing in these sports, it's very intimidating for people looking. So were you intimidated when you first started, and what advice do you give to people who are maybe on the outside looking in being like, I don't know if I could do that?
Right. Yeah. I would say by the time I actually built up the courage to be a part of a club and like go in full force, I had a lot of experience being in just like the active realm and the gym realm, and so maybe less so than some people would feel, but I had people that kind of like handholded me the whole time and made me feel really comfortable there. So finding someone who's like a friend or a mentor, who, you know, will literally take you around the gym and be like, this is what this is for, or like watch you do it. I had people who helped me in that stage to feel comfortable. And then I think by the time I actually got into the club, my starting point might be a little bit different than others. But having a good coach and having teammates that are like super accepting and just finding a space that feels good to you, I think that's what is important to like starting something and feeling confident.
Yeah, I would also add too, like people should like be comfortable asking people for that support too, right? Like you'd be surprised especially in those types of communities, how willing people are to help.
Yeah.
Like, I know you've seen it in your community of Olympic lifting. Like I see it in the martial arts community all the time. It's like you could go to a tournament where you've never met these people before, and like everybody wants to just like help and grow the sport. And so like if you went to somebody and you're like, hey, like how do I get started with this? Like people would jump at the opportunity to help you because that's what they're there for.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, I agree.
I want to pick your brain a little bit.
Okay.
So we're talking a lot about like Olympic lifting, powerlifting, that type of thing, but like all sports require a certain level of preparation and very specific preparation for different things, right? Like we were talking about the difference between powerlifting and Olympic lifting. There's much different preparation that goes into those two things and a different process. Can we speak just a little bit about like how preparation changes across different sports, like physical, mental, and emotional preparation?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a big
loaded
topic.
Question. It's a loaded question. Let's start with physical. Like,
okay,
when we're looking at let's just take something like Olympic lifting versus martial arts. We'll take our two kind of sports.
Yeah.
Like how does the preparation for that go into it? Like how's it different?
Yeah. Okay. So I think Olympic lifting is interesting in that the way that we train in our competition. We train the movements. Our training mirrors exactly what we're going to do on competition day. And with some of the anticipatory sports where you're competing against others, there's skills that you practice, and then there's a different way on game day what that looks like. Yeah. And so for Olympic lifting, prepping our bodies is basically like, what are the positions we need to get into? How do we feel good and mobile doing that? Generally like warming our bodies to get ready to do that. And then it's really like we do the movement with lighter weight and then we do it with more weight. Yeah. So it's like, I mean, there's lots that goes into it if you're dealing with, you know, some niggly stuff with your body and you're trying to address that. But really it's like slower, controlled, less weight, and then more explosive.
but it's so funny because like I have clients all the time when I'm doing personal training, and they're like wanting like all these different warm-up things because they've seen all these different things on Instagram and YouTube of like, this is how I need to warm up my body and I need to have like this. I'm like, what are we doing today? Well, we're doing back squats. Like, well, let's warm up with a squat then.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Let's just like get our body like used to that movement. It's like it doesn't need to be overly complicated. You're just mimicking what you're going to be doing. Yeah. Right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think I haven't played in a sport where I'm competing against others in a really long time, or outside of Olympic lifting really in a really long time. But I think that there's a little bit more like breakdown of like just generalized warming up, and then from the clinician side of my brain, it's like kind of dissecting what demands are placed on the body, and then how can we do that? Like, how can you feel strong and prepped with the muscles that produce those movements? So maybe a little bit of breaking that down into some primer exercises, and then going to do the thing again. Yeah. It's not a sport I have any experience with.
So you gotta come try some martial arts classes.
And I think I should.
And then you come. I'll come and you can teach me some Olympic lifting.
Sweet, sounds great. Yeah.
But it is like in martial arts, like what you're saying, it's very very similar, right? And I like even in like football or baseball or any sport really, you're taking the patterns that you need to be able to react to, right? And you're basically just like putting in the reps for those patterns. Like in martial arts, is in point fighting in specific is what I do. Like it's a lot of just like movement. And so I'll have students and they're like, just like it's hard to practice because I don't have an opponent. I'm like, you don't need an opponent though. Like you can imagine that your opponent is moving in and you go backside. Like and just like repetition that backside. Or like I've worked on like different footwork movements that I'll watch a video back from one of my fights and I'm like, geez, I don't know how I reacted in that short amount of time to move that, but it's because that pattern was just in me.
Yeah.
And so then my body just did it when it felt it.
Right.
And I think that's the same thing like football players. You see them doing these agility drills, or soccer players, agility drills. And it's like you're just training your body to have that in its back pocket for when it needs it. And it's fascinating what your body will do with it.
Yeah. And then I think there's the part of like the skill acquisition of that, making it happen without thinking. Like it's so slow and hard to watch like a child try and pick up an activity that they've never done before, because they're thinking about everything and it's new and their body doesn't know how to do that. And then by the time we get to, you know, I don't know, like 9 years old, you don't have to think about how you run or move. It's just kind of in there. And we have to do the same thing with sports. So practice the repetition. At this stage now, if I think about how I'm doing it, it's going to be atrocious. But if my body is just like, yeah, we got it. You got to turn it off in order to be fast and explosive. I think it goes across the board, all the sports. Yeah, and that's an interesting mental component too, is like you do have to just shut it off. Like if you're overthinking in a fight, or if you're overthinking standing over that bar, like you know you're in trouble. In that moment, you're like, I need to turn my brain off right now and just do it. Exactly. Right? Yeah. When I compete, I am like blacked out. Like there's nothing going on. And then I just have to tell myself, I don't get off the platform unless I lift the weight. So let's lift the weight.
I love it.
The only way out.
I love it. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that mental piece of like in preparation too, because I think that's something that also across the board with sports, that mental component is probably a little bit unique to each sport, but I think the overall foundation of the mental component is pretty much the same. So can you talk a little bit about your mental preparation for when you go into competition? Yeah,
I think it's everything up to the day. And then on the day of, it's like fight mode. Like adrenaline takes over and there's not a lot of thoughts. I think if you ever get a chance to talk with Chris Lemke, he's my coach, ask him about mental prep. It's wild. He is like very warrior style and he will give you the pep talk of your life. And he really relates it to war. He just thinks that weightlifting and sport is the closest thing you'll experience to fighting for your life in our day and age. And that's kind of the mentality on the day. It's just aggression. And all of the prep work beforehand, you just have to have like faith in yourself or you know that you put in the work ahead of time, so that confidence. But up until that day, I think that there's some like different approaches you can have in training, and I've pigeonholed myself into like a mental spiral before, where I couldn't snatch above 60, and that's not. It used to be max for me, and then this year took off, and it should be something that I can just do on the daily. I couldn't get past it, and we tried to take the approach where it's like mental imagery. If you can't see yourself doing it successfully twice before stepping on a platform, don't even touch the bar that day. And then I would be like, hey, I see it, I got it. I'd go and I'd still mess it up, or I'd just like have a negative thought right before, and then it still wasn't happening, and that it just wasn't working for me. And then that was just before the period where I got injured. So then now I'm on this rebuild. So that was the only way I got out of that hole. I don't actually know what I would have done if I just got stuck there. I think we would have just gone to a rebuilding phase where I stripped everything down and tried to build my confidence back up. And I think really there's different days in training too where you can kind of just like turn it on and you feel like aggressive and ready, and then there's other days where you're like, okay, we're just working on technique, and you're just thinking your cues.
Yeah.
Thinking your cues and trying to rep it out as best as you can on those days.
Yeah.
There's so many different tools. I think it's different for everyone.
Yeah. No, but what you're saying, like, just resonates so much with me too, with like getting ready for competition and stuff, is like, you're always battling with the mental component, because life can be shitty sometimes. Yes. Like, it gets stressful. There's a lot that goes on in our daily lives that has nothing to do with our competition, our sport, or even just like our ability to get up out of bed every single day. Like, we have so much that goes into that, and it's a daily battle. But like, when you're leading up to that, it's that ability to visualize and to shut off the negative, right? And I think that's one of the things I love so much about sport. And we could talk about golf too, because golf is one of those sports where it's like, man, is that a practice of like shutting out the negative thoughts, right? It's like that you can just spiral so easily.
Oh yeah.
But credit to what you were saying, like, just leading into it, if you're having these like negative thoughts like, I'm gonna get hurt today, or this isn't my day, or, oh man, that person looks like, for me in martial arts, like, man, that person looks really fast today, like those types of thoughts, like, it's a practice to like shut that out. And I'm the same, where I have to visualize myself getting like my hand raised, or scoring that point, or landing that shot, and moving out of the way and stuff like that. And if I'm not visualizing that, like, I know I'm in trouble. And I've gotten in trouble with that, going into competition with not the right mindset of like, I don't want to be here today, but I'm just here, like, I'm going to do it anyways kind of thing. It's like, next thing you know, you're like waking up off the ground and you're like, shit, right?
How did I get here?
How did I get here? Why did I do this to myself today?
Yeah,
but yes, that mental component is just huge. Yeah.
So you mentioned that, like, you've seen film of yourself fighting, and you're like, how did I move that quickly? Do you use film a lot?
I used to, like, when I was competing more, I would watch mostly myself. Like, I never really film studied other fighters much. Like, when I first got my black belt, then I like studied other black belts a lot more. But now it's like I take a real personal approach to it of like film study. Yeah,
fair enough, because we use video a lot, because it's so technical in Olympic lifting, where you can kind of see some of the stuff and that you don't necessarily feel, or you feel like you're doing something and it's just not happening. So we can do a bit of study of our movement that way. And then also the way that COVID moved coaching, we do a lot of just communication if my coach isn't with me the day that I'm training. But I feel like it's a really good tool to go back to when you're kind of in that hole of like, I don't know what I'm doing, or like my body is just not there. Finding times where you moved your best and it was successful, and then rewatching that can be a bit of a cue of like, oh, I'm so much more capable than I'm giving myself credit for. And going back to that.
Yeah, it's like evidence, right? Yeah. It's like you have to, like, it's the same way mentally too. Like, you got to go back. I talk with my clients all the time about that. I'm like, they're struggling. I'm like, well, can you think of a time in the past where you've been struggling like this? They're like, yeah, I can. And I'm like, okay, well, did you get through it? Yeah, I did. Okay, so like, what tools did you use to get through it? Because like, you have what it takes to do what you need to do. Like, we all do. It's the mental piece of it is almost always what kind of blocks us, right?
For sure. Yeah. So on that, I got to do this competition this past summer. It's really fun. It's called Jacked and Tanned. And we do it outside, and it's a different setup than a normal competition, where you lift at the same time as other lifters beside you, and you have a time cap. Instead of 3 attempts, you have 10 minutes, and you can take as many attempts as you want. In this particular setup, the bar and the weights, well, not the bar, but the weights were in pounds instead of kilos that I'm used to. And so I had no idea what I was lifting by the end of it. But I was like, made that one, okay, put on more. Made that one, put on more. And because there wasn't that mental block of like, oh, I don't know if I've hit this number before, I came out of that putting on 18 kilos to my total. And like, I fought for 4 years for 1 kilo. But in one day, because you didn't have that like mental block of like, I don't know if I can do this, it just skyrocketed. Like, we get in our ways so much. this is the problem so much. Our brains really do a number.
Yeah, it's like the key and the kryptonite.
Oh,
like,
totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's so funny that you say that, because I'll like lie to my clients a lot sometimes. Like, it sounds
the
really
good
bad,
lies.
but like, they'll be like, I'll like grab their weights for them or whatever, and they're like, oh, that's more than I can do. And I'm like, no, that's what you did last week.
Yes.
Right? Or I'll be like, last time you did 15, so like you can do it. And I'm like, no, they didn't. But then they do it, right? Because it goes back to that whole thing of like, even in the Olympics where you see this record, right? It's like Usain Bolt like set this new record for sprinting. And you're like, nobody will ever beat that time. It's impossible, until one person does. And then all of a sudden everybody's getting that time, right? And it's like, because we set these limits in our mind of like, oh, he's the best or she's the best, and so like that's the bar now. But it's like, as soon as one other person touches that bar, it's like all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, that bar's touchable.
Yeah.
And then everybody's grabbing it, right? Until the next person sets the next bar. And so, yeah, that it's just unlocking that piece of like, it is possible. Yeah.
And the people that are the most successful, I think, are they're the most confident, and they have a little bit of that, like, not cocky, well, maybe they're not narcissist, but like they think a lot of what they're capable of, and they're the ones that are like reaching for that, and they're the ones that are like, yep, I got this, before anybody else has done it or before someone else has set that bar. They see the bar and they're like, no, I can do more.
Yeah. And there's like a level of expectation, I think, that plays into it as well, because that can also, you know, you can have this expectation of, you know, I'm going to be the next, you know, whatever, Bill Gates or something, like, I don't know, like you look at success and you have this expectation of like, this is where I should be kind of thing. And that can also, I think, really weigh on somebody as well. So I think there needs to be a balance there too, of like, I'm capable of anything, but like my expectation for today is that I'm just going to do what I can do kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Hard balance.
I want to talk a little bit injuries. So you mentioned like you injured your back, right? And was this during competition, or this was leading up to competition? I was meant to compete on a Saturday, and the Monday before we were testing our openers, so the first numbers that we were trying to hit in competition. And so I injured myself on that Monday, and then had to unfortunately pull out of the comp. That was my most recent. It's so tough when you're like, you've done all the mental prep, right? And you're like, mentally you're ready to go. And then, it's just like these things that are kind of out of your control happen. And just like it's hard to describe. It just sucks. Yeah,
it's super hard. I think at this point, like, it didn't take as much of a mental toll, this injury, as maybe some past have. But because I wasn't mentally prepared, I was like, man, I don't know if I can do this. Life was hard. There was so much going on, which I think is what led to just I was beyond capacity in many areas of life at the time. And then it just came out in a physical manifestation. I was almost relieved, to be honest. But that's not always how it's been with injury. The mental part of it is definitely hard to deal with. It's a big part of identity. And it just goes to show what you were talking about before too, is like everything else that's going on, like it does impact this. For sure. It's very easy for us as competitors to think that these things are separate. It's like, it doesn't matter what's going on in my life. Like I'm here to compete, and like I'm going to compete and stuff like that. But it does matter. Because everything else that's going on, it impacts your prep, it impacts your performance, and it impacts everything. Yeah, and that's something that like I do actually have conversation with patients a lot about, is there's no real separation between that outside of life stressors and your competition or your sport stressors. Your body actually takes them in as very similar load. And so when there are things that are emptying your cup outside of the gym or outside of your sport and your competitive realm, it's very likely going to take a toll on the other, and that can manifest in injury. And oftentimes it is the outside stuff that gets to the sport and into your body.
And I think it doesn't just play into athletes either. It's like the everyday person who's just trying to be consistent at the gym too, where it's like if you're not drawing some alignment between, you know, what your day at work was like and like your session at the gym, you're going to be beating yourself up a lot for like one specific thing. You're going to be saying like, man, I just like can't seem to get maybe this gym thing is just not for me, or like all these negative thoughts that come in of like, maybe I'm not capable of doing this. It's like, yeah, but you have all these other things that are impacting it. Like, that's a part of it.
Totally. Yeah. I feel like people have a hard time drawing those connections, or like there's, when we speak about it, they, from a physical perspective, can interpret it as me saying it's in your head, or like it's just stress in your head, but it's actually like stress in your body. And if you don't know the physiology of it, there are like hormonal manifestations of those other stressors that mimic physical injury or take a toll on your central nervous system, and those things can manifest in, I went to go pick up my pen and now my back just like blew up and I can't do anything, and now they go back to the gym, they're afraid of hinging. That's not actually the issue. It was like the everything else. And
it even goes like plays into like, I don't know if you feel this with your current injury as well, but I know I do. It's like when I'm more stressed or like when I'm more emotionally strained, it's like that shoulder is just like, you just like feel start to like that pain just starts to come in, and you're like, I haven't done anything with it today. Right? It does it when you really become aware of it and you really pay attention to it. You can see that these things all impact each other, right?
Totally. Yeah, I think for me a lot of the time it's like it's sleep and nutrition. Like it was a busy day, or I didn't sleep and I didn't get food in, and now like, end of the day, everything hurts. It's there. I can feel it for sure.
So what do you recommend to people who are experiencing an injury, who want to get back to the gym or get back to their training for whatever they're training for? What's your recommendation for that approach? Let's say somebody has an injury they've been dealing with for a few weeks, and they're like just eager to get back in and frustrated.
Yeah, I think that mistake that people make in their mentality, mistake that clinicians make in their mentality with approaching that is with injury, letting the injury dictate what you can't do instead of listening to the body to see what we still can do, and trying to mimic like their highest goal in the things that we can do now, so that it still feels like meaningful and useful for the person to be in their activity and the thing that they want to do, even if it's modified. But taking the time to play around with things that still feel good, even if it's not quite the way that you were doing it before, or not quite to the fullest extent of what you were doing before. So basically, to sum that up, seeing what you can still do instead of letting your injury just have you stuck in this reel of, no, I can't do that, I can't do that, I can't do that.
Yeah, people just like get it in their mind. They're like, it hurt the last time I did this, so I can't do that. Right? And you actually got me doing a lot more with my shoulder than, like, I was in a mental block like that, where I was like, I was afraid to do anything with it because I was afraid for it to get back to this like point that it was at before. And then I came to see you and you're like, I actually want you to start doing some like overhead presses. I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean overhead presses? I'm like, that sounds very dangerous. But then I did, and the same thing is like, you just do it within pain, and it's like, if you start to feel that's something that's like, that didn't feel right, then you know, okay, I reached my limit there, I'm going to play within that. Right? But it makes a difference, because then even mentally it just makes a difference to be like, yes, like I used my shoulder, right? Or like, yes, I did that back inch and like it didn't hurt today. Like,
totally.
It's huge.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately our industry does a really bad job of encouraging people to move, and instead we focus so much on diagnosing a pathology, and then people are so scared to move, where I think what's most dangerous is losing your capacity. So if you're like, no, you can't use your shoulder, well, it's just going to become weaker and weaker over time, instead of building the things that we can without pain for now. And so we're moving in the right direction instead of going downhill. And unfortunately, that's not how we think of it often.
Yeah. I know. I was just thinking back to like when my shoulder was at its worst. I went to my doctor because I was like, I need something for this pain. Like, give me, please. Like, and I'm not a medicine guy, really. Like, I don't like to take anything unless I have to. It's like one of their first things was like, well, we could get a referral in for a cortisone shot. And I was like, but I haven't like I'm just in pain. I haven't actually like tried anything really yet.
Yes.
Like, I need to like try stuff first. I need to go and get massage and acupuncture and go to physio and like all these things. I need to, use it. And but it's like the first instinct is always like, maybe I need surgery.
Right.
It's like what people always go to. It's like, my back's been bugging me. I need surgery. It's like, have you tried walking like for like consistently? Yeah. That might have a positive impact too.
For sure. Yeah. Right? I used to hate when people come in and see me and they'd be like, I've tried everything. And I'm like, tell me what you've tried. Yeah. And in my mind, the intensity of what they've tried is really not much. Yeah. Or they list modalities. Yeah. And they haven't really put the work in. And it would bother me because I'm like, I have to meet their expectations of what they've seen before. And now, like, let me break those expectations. Yeah. Let's try some things. The confident practitioner. Yeah. I'm like, okay, well, have you really tried a whole lot? And usually we have success.
Yeah. Well, when people think they've tried things, right? Like, like not to like, I don't want to downplay people's pain and their experiences and stuff, because it's frustrating. Like you even just like trying a shoulder press when the shoulders flared up and stuff like that feels like a lot, right? Or like even just like grabbing the cup or something like that, like to the person who's experiencing it, it's like it does feel like they've tried everything. Yeah, it does feel like a lot of effort, whereas to us as the practitioners, we're like, but there's so much more we can still do for
sure, right? Yeah. And it's to no fault of their own. Like I was having this conversation with one of my colleagues of like, well, why do you think people put up with that? Like that's but they're in the position where they don't have that knowledge. They don't have the same knowledge as we do. And so they've gone to someone that they think is competent and sharing with them the best knowledge and the best treatment plan. And to me, it just doesn't look that way. But how are they supposed to know? And when you're already in pain, the effort of seeking out other care is hard to do. And if you have had no inkling that there's more out there, how are you supposed to know? Yeah.
And if nothing seems to be working, it's just like frustrating. You just want to give up. You're like,
totally.
I'm just going to live with this pain forever kind of thing. And
for sure.
But there is hope for people out there. So if you're listening and you're in pain, you have an injury, or even if you're just like eager to start something, right? Like utilize, like my advice to people, and I'll ask the same question to you, is like, utilize practitioners, utilize what you have available to you. And if you don't feel like you have anything available to you, then like go looking for it, because there's so much help out there in the world, whether it's looking for a coach for a sport or whether it's trying to get over an injury. Go see Terrace. She'll help you. Yeah. What would be, just to kind of like cap this conversation a little bit, what would be just like an overall message to the general public who are looking to just stay healthy?
It's broad.
Right? It's like probably the worst question I've ever asked on this podcast.
That's okay. I'm going to take it where I want to. Yeah. I think that I think the most powerful thing for you to know about yourself is that our bodies are so much more capable than we give them credit for. And you can get a long, long ways with a good plan. And so, like you just said, use the people around you and use the resources that you have. If you don't feel like you can do it on your own, there are people who have the knowledge, the skills and the tools to get you there, and build a community for yourself where you feel like you're supported and you can build confidence off of that.
Yeah. See? Not the which question.
There we go.
The answers make the question.
Yes.
So thank you.
Of course.
You for helping me with that. No, thanks so much for being on the show. Thanks for coming in. I'd love to do it again. It's fun. There's a lot of different things that I wanted, different directions I had to stop myself from going too far down. But yeah, this was fun. So thanks.
Thanks for hosting me on my first podcast.
Yeah.
Yay.
Of course. And thanks to everybody who was listening or watching. And we'll see you in the next episode.